So yesterday we had a great deal of snow in this part of Ontario. And I think I had posted something on my Facebook wall about expecting there to be a snow day because of the rain. My forecast was turning to ice then to snow. And ultimately that proved not to be 100% correct because the timing was off by a day. Because now today is a snow day. But the point is that was only a very small time discrepancy. It dealt with a larger issue, looking at things that were unfolding. But there was a lot of snow that had fallen regardless. Now I live in the country, and my driveway is a combination of pavement and gravel, and it's got a weird incline to it. If I had to design it myself, which I might do at some point, I would make it different. But the reality is that I had to go after that snow a few times. Otherwise, let's face it, removing 2 feet of snow is significantly easier when you remove it a half a foot at a time in several different shifts. Of course, you can pick the hard way, which is to do it all at once. That's where, what is it? Statistically, people get the most heart attacks shoveling snow. Or you can go after it piece at a time. It's like most things. Whether it's learning to play an instrument or achieving anything, small incremental steps are the best way to do it. When I was a young man, I had a friend who was a builder, and he relayed a story to me about he was building a barn or something like that, and he had a reasonably good amount of success. But in this one particular instance, he had, in the middle of building this barn or this building, he had put up a wall, and of course, experience is a great teacher, right? But for whatever the reason was, the wall hadn't been shored up properly, and there was a collapse, and there all ended up being some kind of calamitous insurance claim. And it took a long time for that whole situation to resolve itself. When the truth of the matter was, probably about a dozen nails and a few extra 2x4s would have saved the day initially. Now, this circumstance that we're in right now is quite a bit more complex than shoveling snow or deciding how to shore up a building. But at the same time, the lessons are very much the same. Of course, we have differing ideologies out there about as to how serious this situation is based on what we've been told versus what's reality. And I make no bones about the fact that, and you can clearly see even right now where you have a huge difference in what is being reported in the official streams vis-a-vis network TV and quote-unquote government official streams, or the people who are actually there. This is the advent of instant communication is definitely a nail in the coffin of traditional media, which is always, sort of spoon-fed people what they should have. And there's a lot of people who are happy to do that, but, well, let's face it, there's a lot of people who are happy to use an outhouse for a long time too, until enough people could do their business indoors. So, regardless of how you feel about the pandemic, the situation is that the rest of the world, the UK, Sweden, Denmark, very intelligent, progressive nations, have all announced that this is it. It's over, and they're dropping restrictions. Even the Prime Minister of Saskatchewan, or not Prime Minister, the Premier of Saskatchewan has enough brains to see the writing on the wall early. in his recent announcements. And you always have to recognize the all of the players in the game. In the case of the weather being the snow, and or the elements in regard to my friend's failed building project, those are kind of unpredictable. I mean, the weather, we do get a weather forecast for things that are going on, and more often than not, it's at least halfway correct. And so because it was at least halfway correct, and in this case it was fully correct, personally for myself, I knew it was a good idea to remove the snow a piece at a time. Now, in regard to the situation that's going on right now, there are scientists and doctors who are forecasting some very sinister things. And if they're even halfway correct, that's something to be very concerned about. There are political scientists and historians who are looking at the circumstance right now, and they're like meteorologists, they're looking at the forecast. And if they're even halfway correct, then something has to be done. So, this by no means is to create doom and gloom in anyone who is reviewing this video. This is simply all about preparation and being proactive. If this whole circumstance was about being proactive for the 2 weeks to flatten the curve, we've done that. And we witnessed the gaslighting of the government, where we've witnessed the gaslighting of the government in regard to isolating ourselves, which, by the way, if you talk to viral immunologists, they're all in agreement that it's bullshit to do that, especially if you want to achieve herd mentality. FYI. But going back, let's just pretend that the government's the government, God's put them in place, so let's do that. Well, God's put them in place, of course, to govern, but he's also put them in place to create a lesson, because make no mistake, I think it was King Saul was put in place before King David, and we know how all that went, right? Just open the book and take a look. So, we're in a situation now that we have a large enough group of very sane people that if you met them on the street before you went in to get your injection, or they were your friends, you would say, oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't do that. But because they're not your friends, that's fine. And that's a situation you're in now. Now we have people who deal with aspects of freedom and who've experienced the other side of what's going on right now. And we're on the eve of a very giant snowstorm, or that storm that's going to knock down the building that we built so carefully. And we have an opportunity to solve that problem with 12 nails and a few boards. So the truckers are in Ottawa and Alberta right now. And God bless them. If you review my other video about this, they're not brilliant. They're moving in the will, not only their will, but our will, as we've said to God, hey, we want a resolution. How do we get there? So the resolution is coming around because they're arguably the group that has the most to lose, more so than the doctors or the policemen or the firemen who didn't revolt over the mandates for whatever reason. Probably because truckers typically carry a much higher level of debt in there, and they're not as educated, so they're less likely to write a letter than they are. They're like cowboys. They're more likely to mount them up and head down to the OK Corral, right? But the videos I posted earlier this morning about the horse shit that the RCMP is pulling in Alberta, and you could right well imagine there may very well be some garbage that happens in Ottawa. It is a little different though, because the crowd is so very large, and even bringing in the army will not matter, short of systematically, commandeering vehicles, and even if they disable them, we're going to be going either to full-on tyranny or a complete retraction. And this is where we come in, is we're on the eve of the snowstorm. So if you watch the broadcasts of the truckers talking about how long they're willing to stay, some are very comfortable staying a month, or who knows. And the coward in Ottawa who will not even have a dialogue with their leadership face to face because he is a coward, and judge people by their actions. People who will not have friendly dialogue. And again, review the video I posted where the gentlemen are talking to the RCMP. They're extolling completely friendly dialogue, saying, listen, this is just not appropriate. It actually goes against the charter. And if we didn't have the example of the UK, which has 3 times of our population, I guess the argument would have less weight. But we don't. And by the way, we're quite a bit more spread out. So Canada, by its very nature, is socially distanced. However, this chap will not meet with the men who are there doing. It's arguably the most violent, non-violent thing we can do. When I say violent, I mean, I don't know, violence can have a very broad definition, from how you talk to someone to actually physically inflicting them. But the only violence they're really doing is they're just basically saying, well, we're not going to allow you to function until you bring back the sanity, the version of the sanity which we enjoyed before, which is at the bare minimum, the freedom of movement. However, the things that we must be aware of as onlookers right now, because I'm not a trucker, and I'm personally myself, I'm such that I'm a very adaptable person. A lot of small businessmen are very adaptable, can flourish and do what they have to do in a wide variety of circumstances. However, that is not the case for the lion's share of the population. The lion's share of the population depends upon their job and a very predictable set of circumstances, which is completely upheaved by the circumstance we're in, which are going to have very radical ramifications very shortly. It is cyclical, but we can decide, when you see a wave coming, you can decide if you want the wave to totally decimate you, or you can grab your surfboard. So I don't know how the outcome is going to happen in Ottawa, but this is where the rubber meets the road. Because, for example, these men that are in Ottawa, they have a finite amount of time they can stay there from the perspective of resources, abilities, and all that kind of stuff. And yes, we can help them with money, etc., etc. But my brothers and sisters, if there has ever been a time I've often had dialogue with my fellow friends and strangers alike. I never felt it was the time to go and protest at my local city hall, because largely those protests fall on deaf ears. That being said, those protests create an energy which moves forward. An avalanche does not appear overnight. It's been building for a very, very long time. It's that final snowflake that brings it careening down. But as we observe the situation that is occurring right now in Ottawa, we must be mindful of not only the resolve and strength of those who are there doing it, but if that resolve and strength begins to waver, we must be prepared to go ourselves. It may not be something you want to hear, consider, or listen to, and you are right. You don't have to. If you refer to the clip I posted on my timeline in 1315, when the Scottish were faced against the tyranny of the English, they were terrified because it was a much more well-organized army and very, very terrifying. And William Wallace simply said, you can run and you will live for a little while. Or you can stay, and I don't believe anyone's going to die, but I do believe that you could experience some hardship. On an extreme level, maybe some legal issues. The lightest form is that you'll get a little frostbite. But I want you to imagine when our soldiers took Dieppe. As they careened towards the beach, there were probably several of them who were shitting their pants. I'm going to wager there was a few who even stayed on board the ship paralyzed with fear. And years later, they were the butt of the joke. They probably never told anyone they went or any time they were in mixed company. They just were quiet. They were quiet because they didn't matter. So, as we sit right now in our comfortable homes with our comfortable jobs, maybe you're on the social contract, maybe you're a teacher, maybe you've got generational family money that has created a circumstance where you have a lush life, a perceived lush life. Because make no mistake, your successes were all built arguably by men who are better than you, because they created, there's a expression in regard to small businesses. The first generation will build it through blood, sweat, and tears. The second generation will maintain it, but not really expand it very much. And the third generation will destroy it, because they didn't have to earn anything, and they just garnered forward with the silver spoon that they never learned how to use. So as we look, the only thing that's going to win the day is numbers. So as we look and observe what's going on in Ottawa, of course my manifestation is that tomorrow morning Trudeau wakes up and goes, okay guys, I talked with Boris Johnson and Klaus Schwab. Look up Klaus Schwab, he's a real piece of work. And he's the sponsor of Trudeau's extended education. Go ahead, look it up. I hope that tomorrow morning he wakes up and says, yeah, we've decided to back down, etc., yabba dabba do. But you have to know who you're dealing with. And narcissistic people, when they're backed into the corner, as long as they have their flying monkeys, and that's what's going on right now, these politicians, a narcissist flying monkeys are the patsies who hang around them. People who are too mentally weak to walk away. The narcissist gives them little bits of validation so that they'll do their bidding. The narcissist abuses them, make no mistake, but it's always a situation of a little bit of reward and a little bit of abuse. A little bit of reward and a little bit of abuse. And they're this funny little clique. And that's what the RCMP right now, when you watch that footage of the RCMP dealing with the truckers at the border, because make no mistake, the RCMP, when they're standing there, could just say, you know what? Thanks, guys, for your help. And if they said to Jason Kenney, no, man, we're not doing it, Jason Kenney would have no choice but to back down and stop being a bitch. Because make no mistake, he already knows his political career is over, and he will never again be able to walk in public in Alberta. Justin Trudeau will never again be able to walk in public in Canada. These guys will likely escape to some foreign destination, or they'll work behind the scenes, and they will never be front and center again. Because narcissistic people have a very poor understanding of the big picture. They live for the moment. They're very impulsive. And what you see going on right now is very impulsive, which is why it is possible this could get very, very dramatic. But we as the sane and rational must stand back. We must watch how things are unfolding, and we must decide if we are good enough to have been also there to take Dieppe. So in closing, these are not... How lovely if this time had not come upon us in this way. If we had lived just another chapter of life tranquility. How lovely if you could just spend out your twilight years sitting in your lawn chair, in your garage. Or how lovely that you're metal. The world has now asked you to show your metal. Is your metal a rusty, dull piece of shit? Or is your metal ready to be sharpened so that your family can look at your metal in the future and continue to enjoy how useful, sharp, and honorable that blade is?